We saved her $2,500 a month with what we're about to teach you. Then we saved another $2,500 a month saving tax. And then we had them buy this dream house that was on a big farm that I went and visited. They had chickens, bees, a horse, and then built up their practices, and now she gets to take a 3-year sabbatical.
I don't know what the number looks like. About 7 or 8 years ago when I was running the numbers, it was like we had helped people pay off over $20 million worth of debt.
Let's talk about this cash flow index, man.
I love it. So let's talk about, there's like 4 different systems out there that people are using to tackle their debt.
Yeah.
And some of them work.
Don't pay it and go bankrupt.
Yeah, you can go, yeah, or you can just do it haphazardly. Yeah, so don't pay it. I guess that's the 5th one.
Yeah.
Just don't pay it and go bankrupt.
Get massive student loans and they don't get a job, and then just default. But they'll still come after you.
Those all are not good strategies.
No.
So anyway, I mean, some people they have a haphazard approach to everything in their life. They're money avoiders, and so, they pay their bills and they don't have a system. And so like you say, it's a shotgun approach. They don't really know where they're funneling their money. But there's really 3 systems out there that I've been, aware of that people are using very successfully at paying off debt, and each of them has their merits.
Okay.
One of them is called the Debt Avalanche, which is a system where you focus on the loan with the highest interest rate,
okay,
and you line up all your loans from highest to lowest interest rates, and you target the one with the highest interest rate.
Yep.
The second one is called the Debt Snowball.
Not my favorite. Okay, Debt Snowball.
I don't love that one either.
Yeah.
The Debt Snowball is one that was developed by a gentleman out in Tennessee, and
Davey Ramsey?
Mr. Ramsey. And
he's good for the train wrecks. If you're a train wreck, he's got good advice. Now,
right,
this diversified investment portfolio is going to disappoint you, but his whole path to get out of debt by living off rice and beans, if you're a train wreck, he's really good.
It works because he focused on the psychology of the person, and so he'll line up all your loans from smallest to biggest, and he'll pay off the smallest one, and as soon as you pay that off, momentum and snowball until all the debts are paid off.
Cool.
Now he goes a little bit extreme in the event that all debt is evil, all debt's bad. You want to
put your credit card in a freezer and block of ice and blah,
live
blah,
off
blah.
rice and beans while you do that.
I didn't notice his website took credit cards back in the day, though.
Did it really?
I don't know if it still does.
I don't think it does anymore, but
it's very important, pertinent information for you guys.
That's right.
Just trying to poke other people that teach finance. I don't know.
That's right. So I was intrigued with the psychology of his system. Paying off debt, based on the lowest to smallest, highest balance. And
remember, we worked with Jessica Marsh, and she used to follow his system, but lived pretty miserly and miserable because it was all about like every dollar had to have a name.
Scrimping and scraping.
And scraping and living in a house they didn't want and driving cars they didn't want.
Right.
I'm just going to say that we're kind of bad. And then we took Jessica, we saved her $2,500 a month with what we're about to teach you. Then we saved another $2,500 a month saving tax. And then we had them buy this dream house that was on a big farm that I went and visited. They had chickens, bees, a horse, and then built up their practices, and now she gets to take a 3-year sabbatical when her husband
I didn't know he was going on a sabbatical.
Yeah.
Wow.
I took her to a Metallica concert recently in Birmingham.
Oh my gosh, good for her.
I went to speak and then went to a Metallica concert.
It's good to hear that this system.
That's what I do. You got hair like this, you got to go to a Metallica show. That's how it works.
Right. This can be a game changer, honestly. And about 8, 9, 10 years ago, I was going through a period of time where I was, kind of struggling a little bit because I had, accumulated a little bit of real estate loans. Didn't really know Garrett.
Didn't listen to my advice when I was like, don't invest with that one dude, you're gonna lose it all.
I did lose it all, unfortunately.
I hate to say I told you so, but you could have been eating jam that whole time.
It was before I met you, Garrett, so I mean, what do you do?
Yeah.
So anyway, I developed this system called the cash flow index, which is a system that allows you to determine the most effective, most efficient way to pay off your loans.
Yeah.
And what we do is we'll take a look at each of your loan balances, and there's a simple formula that we use. You take the balance of your loan, and you're going to divide it by the minimum monthly payment. Yep. Not annual payment, but monthly.
Minimum monthly payment.
Correct.
Spits out a number.
Spits out a number.
The smaller the number, the worse at effectiveness and efficiency of the loan.
Correct, yes.
The bigger the number, the better.
Think basketball. If
basketball,
you're scoring 50
golf.
points, that's right. You score 50 points in the NBA and you're going to lose that game for sure every time.
Yeah.
So the smaller the number, the worse. And we usually say that if you have an index less than 50, that you're in the danger zone, which means you got to pay off that debt now. Your hair's on fire. My hair's been on fire a lot, as you can see.
Your head's a lot older than you are.
It probably is.
That's what I figured out.
That's right.
Your head's like 80.
The rest
and
of
you're like 40
40,
something.
yeah. I'm 45, so.
Yeah.
So anyway, we put all your loans in this system, and you spit out that number, and then what we'll do is we'll line up all your loans and liabilities based on that cash flow index. And then instead of using a shotgun approach,
every loan but one.
But the one that has the lowest index.
Yeah.
Well, let's say
so ignore the interest rate and focus on the cash flow index. The cash flow index will take into consideration the interest rate, but not as the sole piece. And someone is going to go through this, and you're going to find out your lowest cash flow index is a 0% interest rate loan. And you're going to be like, why would I pay off a 0% interest rate loan? Because we're looking at the bigger picture here. We're considering debt to income. We're considering cash flow. We're considering like freedom and safety. It's not just one aspect.
It's not. So an example, and we worked with a gentleman quite a while back, 5-6 years ago. His name was Jordan Cooper. He's actually, great guy. Dentist out in Arkansas, if I remember right. And he came into our office, and he was in a cash crunch like I haven't seen before. The guy had
He was expanding quite a bit,
growing the business like crazy. And what I did is I did a kind of a detailed analysis of all of his loans, and we found out that there was like 10 of them that had an index below that threshold of 50, and we're like, we got to get rid of this quickly. And so we had a quick triage. We talked about a couple different options. We ended up taking out a larger loan, business loan, at a much lower interest rate. So a lot of his interest rates on his loans were 8-10%. We consolidated all that debt into a single loan. The complexity of his life went out. The interest rate on that loan was about 5.25%. And he freed up $17,000 per month, not per year, but per month in cash flow. I mean, can you imagine what kind of difference that would have in your life?
What a gangster this guy is, huh? That's a gangster move, $17,000 a month.
He was happy with us.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. When he says debt consolidation, he's not going to a debt consolidation service and harming his credit or doing something like that. He's simply restructuring his loans. Could you use a car loan that's a more efficient loan than a credit card? Could you use and refinance that? Could you refinance a home and pay off a business loan? There's like different ways that you can restructure these loans to improve your cash flow index. You're not just stuck with the cash flow index that you have.
Exactly. So we just simply restructured some of his loans, and he was able, he had told me beforehand that he had a really, really hard time saving money for the future. He just couldn't do it. He couldn't even live wealthy today. Oh my gosh, yeah. I think he was redirecting $10,000 a month into his wealth capture account. He also, he loved to spend, so I think he was spending quite a bit of money on enjoying himself,
he also
living
really
wealthy.
Nice gifts. He gave me a nice big old paleo basket. I attempt to eat paleo, it's just that there's non-paleo food that tastes really good.
I love it.
But I buy paleo stuff and then just sneak a little ice cream in here and there.
Exactly.
Non-paleo.
Love it.
Sorry, Rob Wolf.
So anyway, this is a system that we've used successfully with thousands upon thousands of people here at Wealth Factory. And I don't know what the number looks like. About 7 or 8 years ago when I was running the numbers, it was like we had helped people pay off over $20 million worth of debt. And we'd help them free up, on average, about $2,700 per month.
That's just you, man. We got other coaches.
That was like
that's just you, right?
6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
I guarantee it.
Because we got Tim, we've got Reeves, we've got Wade, we got a crew doing this kind of stuff for you. So use this cash flow index. Pay the institutions less money, keep more, shave off the time that it takes to pay these things off. It'll boost your credit score, your confidence in your wealth capture account. So I've got Tim, I think I hurt myself card, and we say this because Tim has hurt his back so bad before that he had to crawl on his hands and knees, couldn't make it, so he just decided to stay in that spot of his house for about 12 hours, laying flat on his stomach. That's why it's Tim, I think I hurt myself, Carden, one of the brightest money minds that I know out there, and my co-host for this segment of Win Then Play Money Matters as we go through the cash flow index. So let's talk about this cash flow index and how it works.
Okay, so the cash flow index is really at the heart of it. It's a way that we can analyze each debt from a cash flow perspective, which is exactly the way the banks and lending institutions analyze loans.
Right.
They teach us to focus on an interest rate so that they can focus on cash flow. We need to focus on cash flow.
Right. So if you only focus on the interest rate, that may be a fool's errand. That might not be the fastest and best way to get rid of these loans. So if you have more than one loan, what you want to do is write down these loans individually. What's the loan balance? And then you want to divide it by the minimum monthly payment. Not what you're currently paying, but the minimum monthly payment with each loan individually. So loan balance divided by minimum monthly payment, that's going to spit out your cash flow index. Now, if that index is less than 50, I call it the cash hog.
Yep.
You have a cash hog on your hands. It means a high payment in relationship to a relatively low balance. Great situation for the bank and financial institution because they're getting a lot of cash flow without a lot of their capital at risk, right? But if it's above 100, that's a more efficient loan, meaning, okay, you have a decent amount of money that you borrowed with a relatively small payment in relationship to that. Now, somewhere between 50 and 100, I'd call that the danger zone, or the, maybe where we look at is there a structure that you could go through to improve your cash flow index? But let's just go through this and why it's so simple and the methodology of how to use it.
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity of it is just that simple formula that you gave them. It's so easy to quickly identify which loans are cash efficient for us and which loans are cash efficient for the bank. Once we identify that, now we have complete control over those payments, and we can prioritize which ones to pay off, prioritize the payments that we're going to make. I see what I call it the flock shoot of debt repayment, right? Where people say, well, I've got all these loans, and I'm going to pay an extra this much to each loan, and they feel like they're making a lot of progress. When
I call that the shotgun approach.
Yep.
Right? You're just like, you shoot and all of it goes there. It's like, okay, whichever loan was due earliest is what okay, I paid extra because that extra money, then the next one you pay extra too. It's a slower, more risky process. Like, what we're really teaching in Win Then Play is economic independence. Economic independence is creating enough recurring revenue, which is known as cash flow, to cover life's basic expenses. So sometimes it's hard to create that cash flow, and some of the easier things to do would be to lower the expenses, but not through budgeting and cutting back and elimination, simply through efficiency, through what you could do with the cash flow index to eliminate an expense, not because you cut back and enjoyed life less, but because you deliberately and intentionally attacked it in a way that helps you to lower that bar, right? When it comes to standards, we want to raise the bar. When it comes to economic independence, we want to lower the bar so it's easier to get over or to jump over. I don't jump very high, so that kind of helps me out, right?
Perfect.
All right, so let's say you've got 5 loans, and one of those loans is a 30. The other loans are in the 50s, 60s, or over 100. So tell them what to do.
So you're going to focus all of your efforts towards loan repayment towards that cash flow index that's a 30. Now, the other thing about it, too, is depending on the balance or the size of that loan, it comes back into control of the money. So if it's $100,000 that I owe, and I can only afford to put $1,000 a month extra towards that loan, it's going to take me quite a few years to pay that off. So I don't necessarily want to make that $1,000 a month payment to them every single month, right? I'd rather put the $1,000 a month in my own account, earn money on that, use it for growth, and then let that grow till I have a big enough balance to pay the bank off.
Just be careful. You're not going to go put that in the stock market or mutual funds or some speculative investment like cryptocurrency. We want something that's stable. We want something that's fairly liquid, meaning it's available to you. You could access that, and that it's not going to be volatile, that because of the economy, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I thought I was doing better, but now I'm not, and it's going to take me longer to pay off this loan. So you want to just continue to be a listener to figure this out as we continue to unveil different opportunities, but we want to begin with the cash flow index. You only pay extra to the one with the lowest, but if you find out that that's still going to be years before you pay it off, you want to set up a separate account and start funding that account first, because you want to build up enough in there to be able to write a check to pay this off in one fell swoop while you still have access to cash, liquidity, and a chance to earn interest. So we'll have other podcasts on how you can lower your interest rates, or how you can restructure your loans, or how you might be able to reallocate if you have inefficient or underperforming assets. But right now, we just want to focus on the cash flow index. And look, you might even find that if you have a lot of loans and you're feeling what most people would call deeply in debt, that can be a hindrance for your health, for your sleep, and for productive thinking. So I even have a strategy around that, because we want to help you abolish scarcity. It's the greatest destroyer of wealth. And one of the ways you could do it is what I would call the 90-day debt delay, where you find your cash flow indexes. And if you have one that's a really low cash flow index, rather than immediately putting money towards that low cash flow index, for the next 90 days, where could you invest your money as a business owner to increase productivity and profitability? As an employee, you increase your skill set or increase your ability that would allow you to get a raise and maybe even learn what to ask and what to do in those interviews in order to increase that income, so that you're investing back into yourself so that you become more productive. And then after that 90 days, now you can regroup with an increased income to start attacking those loans. It reminds me of when I was flying out of Newark. So I was flying out of Newark, and the pilot got in and said, we're at number 27 for takeoff. was like, we're going to be here for a long time. Then they opened another runway that was actually going east, and I was trying to go back to Salt Lake City, but once they got in the air, they just turned around. So we actually went in the wrong direction for 10 minutes, and then we turned around and started heading the right direction, but it was better than sitting on the ground waiting forever. So the 90-day debt delay could feel that way. You're like, well, I'm not actually paying down my debt right now, or not paying down my loans to be more accurate. Well, the reality is, yeah, but you're now increasing your production. You're becoming more abundant. You're being able to create more value. You're increasing your income, which can make a massive difference over time, rather than falling prey and victim to being in scarcity and only scrimping, sacrificing, saving, delaying, deferring, paying this down, and not having any ability to think more productively.
Absolutely, and I love the cash flow index because it gives us an opportunity to discover what our best opportunity is for our cash, right?
Right.
We can look at that cash flow index and say, well, how much cash flow am I freeing up if I go after all my loans? But if instead I use that money, as you just described, to grow, will that outgrow the money that would have been saved by paying off those loans?
Right. You're going to hear a lot from us. Invest in yourself. First, always, right? So you're doing that now and in the future. You're going to hear us say you want to build up plenty of safety and liquidity, because it's not just so that you can handle turmoil or turbulent times, but it's so that you have cash for the opportunities that come your way. There's going to be opportunities, whether that's to buy a business, whether that's to make the right investment, whether that's to, grow your money, not because of, hey, everyone's doing it, but because something within your expertise, something within your wheelhouse, something within your knowledge. We're all in store for dozens of opportunities over our lifetime. Most people just don't have the cash to capitalize on it. And the best time to be able to capitalize on it is when no one else has access to cash, because it's all tied up in the equity of their home. It's all tied up in paying down one loan that didn't lower a payment. So we're trying to help you get more control over your money, have the proper methodology, have a lot more efficient method, and use and determine with this cash flow index. Now, what I've seen happen sometimes is the one with the lowest cash flow index is a 0% interest rate loan, either a credit card or a car loan. And so people will kind of battle with me or say, well, that doesn't make sense. I would pay off a 0% interest rate when I have a 12% credit card over here.
Absolutely. And the only time it would make sense is if those balances are similar, right? Or the cash flow index on them are similar.
Right.
Then I can understand, like, okay, well, one's a 20 and the other one's a 22.
Right.
Fine, go after the one with the interest rate. But when there's a big difference, you're going to get so much cash freed up for so little capital invested,
that you can now go attack that next loan with more vigor, with more cash.
Absolutely.
And you've lowered your risk because you no longer have that payment. And we're looking at everything from debt to income. Debt to income is for every dollar you earn, what percentage of that dollar has to go towards your loans, right? And the higher that amount, the harder it is to get access to borrowing, or maybe even better interest rates, because you can't go borrow the money because you've used too much of your debt to income. So if we can lower the bar from economic independence because we pay something off, and then attack the next loan with even more cash that has been freed up, and plus, if we lower your debt to income, you might have access to better loans, and maybe paying off some of these loans actually improves your credit score. An improved credit score might lead to getting better interest rates. We're looking at a much bigger picture here, not just isolated in one single vacuum.
Absolutely, and that's what happens a lot of times with the loan thing, right? It's just get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt at all cost, any and all cost.
Right.
And so they just attack those loans with full vigor. They jeopardize their safety and security. They jeopardize their growth and production and all those things. The cash flow index allows you to get back into control and say, nope, this is the best way for me to handle it. I'm only handling this one. I'm going to do a debt delay. We have all these options that allow that growth and abundance, which will far, far outgrow the benefits of just total loan elimination.
Right, so loan balance divided by minimum monthly payment. Find your lowest cash flow index. After you find your lowest cash flow index, look, how long is it going to take to pay that off? If it's within 12 months, you might just put money directly towards that to pay that down. If it's going to be years and it's going to take longer, you might want to set up a separate account and start saving your money. We'll be able to reference different opportunities and options as we go through a tool called cash flow banking, and a strategy that way where you could store your money and get maybe 4 or 5% in a tax advantaged way, rather than sitting at 1, maybe 2% in a taxable way in most savings or money market accounts. And to even get 2%, you got to put in a decent amount of money or have access to the right types of banks for that. So we're looking at what are the most efficient ways. You might delay paying any loans for 90 days. Invest back into yourself, in skill set, back into your business if you own a business, or even creating a side hustle where you can start using those dollars to invest in building out the processes, procedures, or the types of things that allow you to earn that extra income. And then when your income goes up, then reallocating towards attacking your loan and paying it down, or or reallocating towards putting more money into that savings account or that investment account that's more safe and stable, that then when that grows to a certain amount, you could pay these loans off. So look at those cash flow indexes, understand where you're at, and even if it's a lower interest rate, you might attack something with the lower cash flow index because it's going to free up that cash flow faster to attack the next loan. You might improve your credit score, which means there's going to be more opportunity. We're looking at the big picture.
Let's give the people what they're looking for. Okay.
Give the people what they want.
Yes. We're here to answer all of your money questions. So the first one's coming in from Ramina. She says, my question is, how do we pay off our credit card debt? We owe $20,000 in balances. I was thinking of applying for a fixed personal term loan, which we are approved for at 11.9% for 84 months. I'm on Social Security disability of $2,300 a month. My hubby averages $15K adjusted gross income per year. We just can't get out from underneath the credit cards. I want to be in somewhat of a financially secure place in 3 years. I know we can do it. We just need some guidance. So let's give Ramina and her husband some guidance on what to do with their credit card debt.
You said that the reason he's at $15,000 of income per year is some health issues.
Yeah, there was just a series of unfortunate events that happened that kind of put him in a tough spot.
That's the first thing I look at in this situation is how do we increase income, right? If that's at all possible. Is there, side hustles? I mean, I did a phone call this morning. You heard me on speaker. They're making money on their vehicle using Turo.com. They're driving it. They're renting it out 3 times a month, and that renting it out on Turo is paying for the car and cash flowing. So you can always look at existing resources to find out how to be resourceful. One of our mutual friends that's been on the podcast a bunch and YouTube with me, Demi, rented out a room on Airbnb. There's millions of stories of Uber and Lyft drivers like that. Like you always got to look at do you have existing resources and things that you can do to be more productive? I started my first car detailing business because my dad had plenty of cleaning supplies in the garage. And my mom worked at a credit union. My dad worked at a coal mine, and I cleaned those vehicles. So look at what you have there first. Then we look at the loans. And to me, one of the things that's critically important is called cash flow index, where we take the loan balance, we divide it by the monthly payment. Okay. If this number is 50 or less, we have a cash hog on the hands, right? That means it's a very inefficient loan. If that number is, greater than 100, that's a really efficient loan. It's actually not requiring a very large payment for how much money you've borrowed. So if you're trying to pay something off, you want to know your cash flow index of any loan that you have, because it kind of tells us the priority. Now, in their situation, the 11.9% is high, but at the same time, because she's on fixed Social Security amount of income and her husband's not earning as much income, that's why it's a higher interest rate. Now, did they have other assets or anything else?
She didn't go into details on that.
One of the things I always look for is there other assets that are out there? Could you borrow from a 401k? Could you borrow from cash value? Could you go refinance a car? Right? We're looking for anytime you have collateral, like cash value has collateral of life insurance where they'll lend you money based upon how much you have. Usually loan interest rates on 401ks are really low. Now, it's not my favorite place to go borrow money because there's fixed payback periods, and it's all pre-tax dollars that you're paying back with after-tax dollars. So there's disadvantages, but if we can lower the interest rate, we can lower the payment, we can improve the cash flow. Those are things to look at. There's also intra-family loans. We've had people that just borrow from family members because they're sitting on plenty of cash. We've done it for down payments for mortgages and things like that because now they're earning more than they were in their measly savings account. But at the same time, there's collateral behind it and they're helping out someone they care about. So I want people to think more resourcefully first. And so 11.9% for 84 months, that's kind of a high payment. Obviously, that's going to be a lot of their income, is going to go to this. So I want to look at those other options.
Now, if she has the option of refinancing a current car loan that her and her husband already have, how would one go about doing that?
Go to your bank or credit union. It's already collateralized, so it's a refinance. Most people don't think about, they think about buying a car and financing it up front. But if it's paid off, you could always go and get a loan. The car is collateral. It's actually a car loan. So you're going to go talk to wherever you're currently banking at, where you already have an account. Okay.
Now, the other thing I think is really important is understanding the cost of money. Will you go into that a little bit?
Okay. Cost of money is simply the highest interest rate that we're paying for our money is a cost of money. So in her case, 11.9%, if that's where all of her loans, that anytime she spends $1, it's costing her 11.9%, right? So it's the highest amount that we're paying on our money. Or it's forfeiting interest that we earn, depending on what that is. So let's say I know I can earn 5% on my money. I know with really high levels of certainty, 5% is pretty easy to do. Anytime I spend $1, I'm forfeiting the right to earn 5% interest. So it's either, we always have an interest cost, right? We either pay interest if we borrow, or we forfeit the right to earn interest. Either way, there's an interest cost. It's just more obvious the one that we're paying for than when we forfeit the right to earn. So our cost of money is kind of that bar that says, at this point, I have to earn at least this much to make it worth my time. Like if you have a 5% loan and someone comes and says, I can get you 3% guaranteed, not too exciting because you're losing, right? Because you're paying 5 and you're only earning 3. On the other hand, if you're only paying 3 and you can earn 5, maybe the fastest way to pay off that loan is earn the 5% if it's got predictability, if it's stable, if it's secure. There's a lot of people that erroneously, like remember your college notes, that said, oh, the market's just going to do 12%. Well, if the market was really going to do 12%, the slowest way to pay off a mortgage would be pay the bank extra money. The fastest way would you invest the 12%, and then when it grows, you pay the mortgage off, and you've earned more than you would have saved by paying it down, right? But the reality is the market doesn't get 12%. It doesn't do that long term.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of fees and taxes and all sorts of riddled with holes along the way where it goes down. So we have to be really careful. But knowing our cost of money helps us understand whether we should invest or pay off, whether something's efficient or inefficient, effective or ineffective. So I always think about my cost of money before I do something because there's always an interest cost.
And that's where the cash flow index comes in, is understanding your cost of money.
So knowing your cost of money, it's personal finance has to be personal. For some people, paying off a loan is so critical for them because it brings peace of mind. They feel, oh, I'm finally free. For other people, like I have a mortgage on my home. I don't have car loans. I don't have a mortgage on my cabin, but I have it on my home because I don't plan on staying there forever. It's really low interest. And in a highly predictable way, I can out earn it. And I could pay the home off tomorrow if I want to pull it out of my cash values.
Yeah.
Now, other people, they just don't feel comfortable with that. They're going to lose sleep. No savings is worth that, right? So maybe you're just best paying that off, and now you can be more productive. One is the economics, which is your cost of money. The other is your peace of mind, which is just what your personal preference is. And I think we need to take both things into consideration, where some financial gurus just automatically go, pay off your debt or else you're enslaved. The Bible says pay off your debt or else you're enslaved, but most people haven't even identified what debt is. Debt's when you owe more to someone than you have in an asset. When you have an asset worth more than what you owe, that's actually equity. It's the opposite. So my home is worth more than the loan on it. I'm not in debt. I'm in equity, but I do have a mortgage. Now that's probably blowing a few people's mind. A few people are pissed off right now and they want to tell me, paying off my mortgage is the best thing I've ever done in my life. I'm not.
Some people get very passionate about that.
If you paid it off, congratulations.
Yes.
I never told you not to. I have no dog in the fight. I don't care. It's just know your options and do what's best for you.
And the peace of mind is a really important factor. I think sometimes gets left out of the equation. It's just like, if you scrimp and you save and you kind of cut back, like eventually you'll get there and be able to enjoy your life and you'll be able to show up. But I think peace of mind allows us, like if we consider that in part of this situation and in our lives, it allows us to show up differently in the world. And when we show up with more confidence, because we have peace of mind, then we can create greater value. We can be more creative with our thoughts. We're more open to connecting to other people, which expands our means. So peace of mind is actually, I think, a really important part of deciding what to do with our money.
It's an essential piece.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to move on to a question coming in from Richard. Okay. So you've discussed a couple of ways that Romina could pay off her loans. Richard has a specific question. He said, should I follow Dave Ramsey's plan or use a different strategy for paying off my debt faster? I've been doing some research on trying to pay off my debt. I love the idea of the snowball effect, where I pay off the lowest bill first and use the extra income to pay towards the next biggest loan. Do you have any suggestions or comments? I'll let you speak, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions.
You know, that's a good plan. What I like to do is a combination of what's called the cash flow index that we just showed, loan balance divided by monthly payment, and you only attack one loan at a time, pay the minimum to everything else, and it's the one with the lowest. The lowest cash flow index is what you're going to pay the extra to. Now, the difference between that and Debt Snowball is this takes a little bit of consideration into the interest rate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Not just the
I
payment.
like the philosophy of let's just pay off the one that's the easiest to pay off, the fastest to pay off, because then that's freed up and we got more cash flow. Love that. But this is just going to be an equation that says, well, let's figure out which one's going to be the bigger movement.
Which one should
when
I
it frees
tackle
up,
first?
right?
Yep.
And then in order to really improve it, the 3 R's are restructure, reallocate, and renegotiate. So to restructure a loan, we're looking at, well, what if you refinance your home and pull other loans into it that have higher interest rates and now you got lower interest rate? What if you what we said earlier, refinance your car and pay off higher interest rate loan? So if you can restructure or refinance loans, you might be able to get better cash flow indexes and therefore pay less in interest. Then the second thing is reallocate. Let's say that you just have an underperforming asset. You have something that's not earning a high interest rate, but you're paying more than what it's earning. Let's cash that thing out, pay off that loan, and then that's going to free up that cash flow. That's going to get you a guaranteed return because you've saved the interest. Or renegotiate. Like if you have a credit card, don't just assume whatever they're charging you is what you have to pay. Call and renegotiate. Ask questions like, hey, what are your best deals? Are there balance transfer deals? If I'm looking to cancel, what can you do for me to keep me as a customer? These types of questions, so you get to the retention department and they lower those interest rates. Or a streamlined refinance with your home where you stay with the same company but get a lower interest rate because you have options because interest rates are low. You just have to make sure you have a good credit score, decent collateral, which is cars and homes are decent collateral, right? The right cash flow reporting, so you look good to the bank.
Yeah.
And then good connections, so you're going to the right institutions that specifically deal with what you're looking for. So I would say go with the cash flow index, pay only extra to one loan at a time. But as you do that, look to restructure, look to reallocate, and look to renegotiate the interest rate so that you can actually get ahead even faster.
Okay. So is there ever a time when the snowball method is a good fit for reducing debt?
Sure. It's not a bad method at all. Yeah.
Just always
Helped out a lot of
consider
people.
the cash flow index,
Yeah.
the interest rate.
I'm just giving a little bit different take on it. And here's my big concern. If you're trying to eliminate debt, don't get in a scarcity mindset that's all about reduction and sacrifice and scrimping and saving. Look to keep more of what you make, get more efficient. Look to expand your means, like you said. How can you add more value? How can you increase your income so you have more to work with?
Yeah. Amen to that. I remember when I was using the snowball method myself to pay off my Plymouth Neon back in college. and just even after I graduated, my Plymouth Neon, it was purple, just riding in style.
Is Plymouth in business these days? I haven't heard that word for a while as a car company.
I mean, I don't know. I don't keep up on cars.
Okay, yeah.
But maybe it was a Dodge. Who knows? But anyway.
I think it was a Dodge Neon.
Okay. So I was paying off this little car of mine, but I remember spending hours every month.
That's the concern.
Budgeting. And I would erase and I would move money around.
Did you feel
and
inspired?
I would fill my envelopes and it was not inspiring. I wasn't thinking about how to expand my means. It was just me trying to get by.
You've got to start with production first.
Yes.
And reduction second.
Yeah.
Be mindful with your cash. Be frugal's fine, but as soon as that starts to turn into miserly, as soon as that starts to consume your thinking, as soon as that starts to be, you miss out on life and you don't invest in yourself and you don't think about impacting others or value creation, that's where it becomes detrimental.
And it was actually really stressful for me, so
Now I'm just stressful for you. That's what you traded off. You don't have to worry about your debt, but you got to stress about my crap.
Yeah. So I think it's a good starting point. Like you said, Richard, maybe just incorporate some of these other things. And, if I think of investments, if I would have spent the 2 hours a month investing in myself, investing in ways to expand my mind and, grow in deeper ways, I probably would have been more fruitful. So I know that's preaching in the choir. You talk about that all the time, but I experienced that. Right. So I can relate to Richard, and I think it's a great question.
All right, Stolba, what up?
You ready to dive in?
Do you think you can hold it together for this episode?
I'm going to try really hard.
I think my rant I had in between takes there was pretty good.
It was pretty phenomenal.
The dog decided to walk down the stairs. So if anybody heard that, that's just the dog tiptoeing up and down the stairs. Phoenix, just chill, bro. Just chill. All right.
Okay. 2 questions about credit card debt.
Yeah.
So we have one from Gloria. She's just curious, how can she pay off her credit card debt? You
can't even say Gloria's name without hearing me sing Gloria, the church song that I learned as a
The
kid.
Christmas song.
Is that a Christmas
Do you
song?
want to give us a little taste of that now?
It's pretty bad. I'm not going to do it. No.
I'm hearing
gonna spare
it
people.
right now. And
Yeah.
it's so Gloria is just wondering in general how to pay off her credit card. But we're going to tie her question to Lisa's question, which is we've been paying a minimum payment on our credit card debt for a number of years. Is it a good idea to renegotiate with the credit card company to lower debt? So consumer debt is very high. So this is a very common question. I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this. So let's help people get out of credit card debt so they can produce more in their life.
3 R's. 3 R's. All right. I like the alliterate. I like,
Okay.
so renegotiate. Yes. Absolutely want to renegotiate. The best way to do that is get your credit score above 760. If it's above 760, you're a better, borrower, so to speak. So you just got to do some basic things there, whether it's, if you have any late payments, get a letter of deletion, get that caught up. Whether that's errors on your credit report, they've got your name spelled wrong. They don't show the right utilization rate, meaning you have a credit card, $5,000 available to you. You haven't you charge $1,000 on it. You're in good terms. But if they don't show that you've got $4,000 left over because they don't show the available balance, it lowers your credit score. So you want to check all 3 bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Make sure there aren't those errors. Limit your hard inquiries, which is other people checking your credit. You can check yours. That's a soft inquiry anytime that you want. And if you have an installment loan, like a car loan that you're paying on time, that can actually help your credit score. So those are just a couple of really basic things there. Let's get this above, 760, and let's try to renegotiate. If it's a credit card, call and ask if you can do a balance transfer, because you're looking at another company. Say that you're looking to cancel the card because you want to go with a different company, or look for the deals that are out there. So you get to the retention department, get to the right individual, and I think you're going to have a good chance of getting your interest rates lowered. Talk to the first person that answers the phone. They might not have any authority to actually change it. So that's the first R, renegotiate. The second R is restructure. Do you have equity in a home? And you could refinance and pay off high interest rate credit cards, save interest that way. But you got to be careful because some people just go charge the credit cards right back up. And now they have a mortgage and now they have credit cards again. So we've got to look at the behavior.
Yeah,
Snowball, we got to
definitely.
look at the behavior.
Yes.
You're a very responsible individual.
I try to
Not
be.
everybody's as responsible as you. So what got people in the debt in the first place? Trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to fill some void from childhood because they didn't feel worthy enough. Handling, like what I do is I would just binge eat if I was going to do it, hit some sugar. Like that's how I deal with my feelings. That's my adult pacifier. So if it's spending money, we got to get clear about that, because if you're going to do that, don't restructure. Only restructure if you've got a way to be responsible and a
And if you're
separate
serious
account
about
to
it.
save the money,
Yeah.
right? Or you can reallocate. That's the third R. Do you have any cash value? Do you have a 401k? Do you have something else like a CD that's not getting a high interest rate that you could utilize that money to pay off a higher interest rate loan like your credit card? By paying that off, you should be able to improve your credit score. Improve your credit score, renegotiate other loans. And there's this big trickle effect. So renegotiate, the answer is absolutely yes, but we want to go with the 3 R's, right? Which is restructure, yes, renegotiate, and reallocate. Look for other resources. Now, I've seen intra-family loans where someone might lend money, and I know some people are like, oh, that would be the worst idea. And for some people, it would be. But for others, it could be a really good scenario where they can get a higher interest rate than they're getting at an institution and lower the interest rate for the family member. So that might be a situation. It might just be going to a different type of loan that gets better interest rates, like a paid off car that gets refinanced and pays off a credit card. Just having collateral and having good credit score helps you out. But it's almost like get your cash flow reporting. Look like a good borrower when you go into the institution, right?
Yeah.
Get your financial house in order. Watch other videos that we do that way to see exactly what to do there. But there's a couple pieces. What else? What else you got for me?
Well, I'm just, if someone's going in to renegotiate, it's going to be a good idea for them to actually have their credit score in place, like you said. Like have a 760, you said, or 780?
Well, 780 is what I used to say. And I talked to Eric at Credit Nerds, and he said 760 is pretty much the same thing, and he is a nerd of credit. So I said,
Okay.
Great, I'll say 760. It used to be back in the day 720, but they did inch it up a little bit after the 2008 credit crisis. So 760 is the number. We gave a few tips of how to improve that. There's actual videos that people can go to that we've got on YouTube that specifically say what to do to improve the credit score. All right, so 760, yes.
Okay.
What else you got for me?
Well, is there any order to the 3 R's? Is there one preferred over the other?
I would go reallocate first. Anything that you have a low interest rate on that you could pay off a high interest rate, that's a guaranteed return. Then I would try to, restructure loans. so that you could just get much better interest rates, and then renegotiation would be the last one.
Okay.
But you know what? I don't know. If you don't have any other assets, maybe you go to renegotiation first. If you don't have a good credit score, maybe restructuring is going to be a lot more difficult. So look at your credit score. I don't care what service you use, go Google it. There's free credit report, annual credit report, Credit Karma. The list goes on and on and on. The key is to know where you're at, because you can't really improve it unless you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And tons of people have errors. So you want to look for those errors.
And it could be just an extra letter on your name, the wrong apartment number, whatever it is. It could be
Stolbia, like they got an I in there.
I get Stolbla a lot. Can you
Stolbla?
believe that?
Geez, Stolbla.
It's not that difficult of a last name, but I get some unique variations of it.
I get Gary a lot when I'm talking to like people on the East Coast. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Gary.
I just
you don't look
answer
like
to
a
it.
Gary.
Maybe not. My wife doesn't like when people call me Gary. I don't care.
I
know who they're talking to. It's fine. If I'm never going to
prefer
talk to them
Garrett.
again, I don't need to correct them.
Yeah. So when someone is looking at paying down their credit card debt, I think you brought up a really valid point of looking at the behavior. So why is it that you feel compelled to, buy expensive things or charge?
Maybe you're sad and you buy something that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just too easy to click something and it shows up on your doorstep. Maybe you haven't looked at your finances from week to week or month to month to know
Is there
how much
avoidance
is coming
there?
in versus how much is going out. Maybe you're married to someone you thought was going to make more money and they haven't, and that's disappointed you. I mean, this is the real stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've really got to look at this.
Yeah.
And what I find is it's usually some childhood thing that we've never addressed.
Of course. It's always
right?
back to our childhood, isn't it?
So we're buying things to impress people that don't even care when it
Right.
comes down to it.
Yeah, I don't think there aren't very many people, at least I should at least speak for my circle, that are just looking at like, oh, you've made it because you have X, Y, and Z. Like we have to just live quality lives that we've
Because I
determined
got a
ourselves.
record player that you're impressed, huh?
I'm very jealous of
record
this
player.
coffee machine of over here of yours,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and there's certain, like, right now I want to buy a new coffee machine, espresso machine.
yeah,
So what I did was I just said, okay, when I get a full fee for the one-man show, I'm going to take that because it's about 10% of the full fee to get the new. But so it just becomes part of an objective.
yes,
So that it's part of the game, and it kind of like signifies a cool moment. And, because as you know, we're investing a lot into this,
yes.
and we're putting a lot into this channel.
It's gonna be phenomenal.
And
can't
we're
wait.
just up to making a bigger impact, but that doesn't always come with cash flow immediately. So I'm just investing and investing and investing, and in a long-term situation. So I don't need to buy certain things. I've got more than I can utilize on a daily basis, right? So sometimes it's just having an inventory of gratitude of what you do have, instead of being
a good
upset
reminder.
about what you don't have or what you want or what you think will make you happy. The question is, what makes you happy, right? Credit card debt doesn't typically make people happy. Getting in credit card debt creates temporary happiness sometimes, but long-term misery.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just look at the kind of life that you want to create for yourself, and if you don't have the peace of mind, if you don't have the satisfaction in the basics, I feel like it's going to be much more difficult when you get
Look,
to a bigger place.
There's times I've had cash flow crunches. Let's be candid.
Yeah.
So
And most people do.
2008, I definitely did. Had a massive real estate portfolio that I wasn't paying enough attention to. I launched the book Killing Sacred Cows, and I felt like I had to go through some type of crucible or test. Did I believe what I was writing? So now I was like going through the trials and tribulations in my own life at that time. And so when it was June 1st, 2008, I just written all these checks for the PR firm, for the book promotions, for all this kind of stuff. And I was like, it would be irresponsible to have some type of epic anniversary date where I go get a hotel and spend all this money. So we have this little tiny family cabin that was paid off. And what I did was I wrote these cards, these little 3x5 cards with questions. And I blindfolded my wife and I asked those questions as we went up to the cabin. And it got really cool to know each other and talk about like, when was the moment you knew you loved me? And, and when was it for, and vice versa. And then when we got up there, I just had, rose petals kind of scattered, and we just had some cool music. And even though it's just this little, like crappy little cabin, we just had a cool experience. It didn't
Yeah.
require a lot of money to have something extraordinary.
Right. Because
And-
you can create a phenomenal experience from little.
It's
you don't
still
have
one of
to
the
have a
top
lot.
ones that we remember.
Yeah.
Right. So what can you do to be more resourceful during those times? And then by being more resourceful, you're not racking up credit cards. You're not financing a lifestyle that doesn't exist. It kind of reminds me of on Conan O'Brien, he had Louis C.K. on, and he talked about the days where you had to go in and get cash from a bank, right? And you'd have to write a check out to cash. And he says, and then credit card machines were these big clunky things. They'd be like,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and then,
I
you know,
remember those.
and he's like, and when you ran out of money before credit cards, you just stop doing stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, okay. And I think
It wasn't
sometimes we
even an
spend
option.
optimism. Like, oh, you know, or we think these things will make us happy, but what they really do is make us more indebted. And so I'm not saying that I know psychologically why everybody gets there, but don't try to fill a hole in your life
Definitely.
and finance it.
Right.
Really get clear about, like, you know, like there's just some basic things that you could do, but don't make these moves if you haven't addressed the root issue.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get into Christian's question, word of the day, principle. I think this is so important to understand the financial vocabulary in this industry, in this space, as we're learning to be more free financially. So principle, I'll just read the definition. And if you want to add something to it, you can. So when we have a loan, the original amount that is borrowed or the outstanding balance to be repaid less the interest rate.
Okay. Yeah. And then also could refer to like a amount of investment principle, like how much should you put in, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when principal is calculated, does it take into consideration the interest and the fees being charged?
Well, when you're looking, it depends on what you're talking about with calculated. With an interest-only loan, there's nothing really to calculate. It's just what interest you're paying. But I think what you're asking is when something's amortized,
Yeah.
how does that work? Because if you look at an amortized schedule, you're paying a lot more loan interest up front than you are later on, right? So you'll see a lot of people that talk about velocity banking really address and attack that. You know, it depends on timeframes do make a difference on what that is. But overall, what have you paid in interest? 5%, but it was front end loaded and started to reduce, where you see that eventually it's like half principal, half interest, and then eventually it's more principal than interest, and so on and so forth.
So when someone's going to pay a loan, whether it's a car loan or otherwise, how can they make sure when they take their $350 payment or they turn it in that it's going more towards principal than
The
interest?
best way to do that is get an interest-only loan, and then when you make an extra payment, it reduces the balance, and you're now charged based upon the balance, not based upon the amortized amount.
Yeah.
So if you have a 30-year mortgage that's $1,000 a month, it's $1,000 a month now, and in 15 years, and in 20 years. But the reality is you're paying way more interest in day one than you are in year 20.
Yeah.
Where when it's interest only, you have a lot more control over that. Like I'm actually refinancing my mortgage to an interest-only loan right now. You know, for some people, their behavior is they only pay what's required. And so they think if I go to a 15-year mortgage, I'll pay it off faster. And for some people, that may be true. And you even see with interest rates really low right now, people are barely upping their payment by going from 30 years to 15 years. So that's progress. My feeling is I like control of my money. I know I can earn more than I'm being charged right now on my interest rate. That's not through speculative things like the stock market or anything like that. It's through very stable, secure investments that we've talked about. So it really just kind of depends on your situation. But my preference has always been interest only.
Okay. That's good to know. All right. So if you,
By the way, did you ever heard of a negative amortization loan?
I don't think that I have.
So they used to have loans where you could pay like a lower payment than what your interest was being charged. They were really popular back in like 2005, 2006, 2007. And so you would actually start having your principal balance increase over time because you're not making enough interest payment.
That sounds nasty.
And it was for a lot of people because now they were upside down, and then the economy changed. So they lost all their equity, and then all of a sudden they're underwater, right? They owe more than their house is worth.
Right.
And so that was a little bit of an issue that kind of facilitated even more defaults. But for a responsible investor that's like really dialed in, it could make sense, but it does have additional risk, obviously.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I was going to say, why would
I could teach you something new today, Stella.
Always. I'm always learning something when I'm around you. Okay, so let's dive into Christian's question, and this is what he has to say. My question is regarding how to reduce debt quickly. I make about $180,000 a year. I live in California, and I just recently found myself in the hospital from an anxiety attack. This has been super scary for me since I've never experienced it before. I have a $3,600 a month mortgage, 3 car payments, not including a couple of credit cards and other expenses. Thanks for your help. And so Christian's just wanting to know, how do I reduce my debt?
Well, first, I want him to pay attention to the 4 C's, which is what's your credit score? Get that above 760. And it's not as much about the score as having a really clean report. Look for errors. Look for, your utilization rate of those credit cards that he mentioned. Make sure that they're reporting your available balance and it doesn't look like they're capped out, because that could lower your credit score. If you're above 760, then go to the second step, which is if you can refinance anything that has collateral against it, you can pay off your non-collateral loans with a much lower interest rate. So if you have a car loan or a mortgage and you refinance those to pay off these credit cards that he's talking about, that could substantially reduce your payment and the interest rate that you're paying, and therefore help you out. The third C is basically your cash flow reporting, just making sure you have your financial house in order, right? Making sure that you look good to a lender so that you can get the best loans. And then the fourth is the right connections. Certain lenders lend better to others than they do to, like, business owners sometimes have it more complicated because their income is more volatile. They do major write-offs, but he has a $180,000, mortgage here that's a W-2, or not mortgage, salary that's a W-2, which is helpful for these things. The second piece here is to look at your cash flow index. So take your loan balance of each individual loan, that mortgage, those credit cards, the car loans, whatever and then you just divide it by the required payment. What do you have to pay on it every month? That's going to spit out a number. I only want him paying extra to the one with the lowest cash flow index. That's going to free up a boatload of cash flow, or it's going to be the thing that he can get momentum and get there faster with. You don't have to worry about the interest rate. It's considered in the calculation. It's just not the only calculation. And then that's going to help you to pay that off. And then that cash flow gets freed up, which will reduce anxiety.
Yeah.
Then the next thing is really focus on the 3 R's. The first R is the restructure of loans, which I've been talking about here, right? But part of restructure could be lengthening some of the loans so that you have less outgo and more control of your money. Now, here's the deal. Most people, the way our minds work is we go, if we lengthen the loan, we will have the loan longer. And the institutions want you to think that way. But instead, think of it as I have more control over my cash and I can pay that off when I choose.
Yes.
And I have cash on the side in case there's a job change or anxiety that puts you in the hospital for extended periods of time.
Yeah.
You've got cash that gives you staying power. So it's not just restructuring from, collateral loans and paying off non-collateral loans. It's even the length of those loans that help you to improve your cash flow, and then using the cash flow index in coordination with that. Now, another thing is reallocation. So if you have any investments that are underperforming, too risky, that you don't feel comfortable with, you could always use those to pay off higher interest rate loans. Those higher interest rate loans gives you a guaranteed savings and improves your cash flow. So that is a way that you could accelerate it. And then the third thing would be, the third R is renegotiating. So multiple credit cards here. Have you called to ask for better interest rates? Have you called to look at balance transfers? Have you told them that you're looking for their best deals so that you don't leave them as a customer? And so if you can renegotiate, that's also helpful. So, those are just a couple pieces, but I think it's important to understand the context of, there's 3 ways to really deal with this. One that most of the pundits will say is you just live off rice and beans and you pay this off by budgeting. But budgeting, and the studies are in from Time Magazine, it doesn't work because people not only don't stick with it, they rebel against it and eventually spend more than originally anticipated. So it's really been a very problematic situation. The second thing is to be more efficient. So I would really look at, can you save on tax? If you're getting refunds from the government, change your exemption so you have that money to start paying off loans today versus giving the government an interest-free loan, right?
Yeah.
Could you save on interest through some of the strategies that we talked about? Are there any investments that you can minimize expenses or use to pay things off, like I mentioned? Or do you have duplicate coverages or costs with insurance that can allow you to get money to pay off these loans? So I'm looking for efficiency too. And then the third thing is expand your means. So you can live within your means by budgeting and cutting back, being efficient, or expanding it. So how can you make more money? Have that question. How do you add more value? How do you serve more people? How do you more deeply impact the people you serve? How do you create upside potential in what you do? Those are going to be ways that help you to accelerate the payoffs here. And then really look at unique and different loans. I mean, is there any type of loan that you could get that came out with the CARES Act? Is there anything that you could do within family members where you can give them a better interest rate than they're getting in the bank, but you get a better interest rate that the bank's giving you. And so you just cut out the middleman and do an intra-family loan or an intra loan that kind of helps out and do it privately. So those are a lot of pieces that I think are really helpful if you want to pay something off quicker.
Yes. One question that I have that might be helpful to Christian is, can you define debt? Because there's some confusion around what debt really is.
Even when people don't think they're confused about it, they're not defining it right, because people have, I don't know, whether it's marketing, whether it's misinformation, like people think anytime they owe money, it's debt. But debt in generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP accounting, is when we take a balance sheet, which is just your assets versus your liabilities, right? It's kind of like what tells you your net worth or your equity or your debt, because the opposite of equity is debt. So if I have an asset that's worth $100,000 and I have a loan that has $50,000 against that asset, most people say I'm $50,000 in debt. It's actually the opposite. They're $50,000 in equity, because if we take the 100,000, subtract the 50,000, that's 50,000 of positive equity. Yet everybody calls it debt. And if we're thinking got to avoid debt like the plague, then we feel this major burden. And then people start quoting the Bible of saying like the borrower is a slave to the lender and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, well, let's be really clear. Like, it depends on who you are, what you can do with those assets, what kind of cash flow it's providing. But let's be clear, there's difference between debt and loans. And loans can either be inefficient or ineffective, or efficient or effective. So if it's ineffective, it's if we borrow money, we consume, and we no longer have an asset to show for it. That is going to lead to debt, right? And then secondarily, if we borrow money and we have a major payment against that money because of high interest rates or short terms, that's a very inefficient loan that can really tear up our cash flow. So an efficient loan is a cash flow index under 50, loan balance divided by payment. Or less than 50 is inefficient. Efficient is greater than 100. And there's kind of like that no man's land between 50 and 100. Okay. So that's important to understand. Debt isn't just owing someone. It's owing more than what you have. Now, you may still want to never have a loan, and that's fine, because maybe it doesn't allow for peace of mind. Maybe it starts to stress you out, or maybe, people live outside of their means because they have access to money for cars and houses. Like if we didn't have lending on houses and cars, they would be less expensive and less people would be in trouble, because those are not assets that typically create cash flow. Sure, you can use the Turo app with your car and rent it out. Sure, you could Airbnb your home or VRBO or any of that kind of stuff, but most people don't. So they think it's an asset, but assets that don't create cash flow are not truly assets until they can actually impact your income statement when you have more income than expense. For most people, those are expenses, but they're lifestyle expenses. I'm not saying to avoid them, just be mindful of them.
Yeah, I think this is a good point, like especially since Christian shared that he was feeling anxiety. We don't know what the cause of it is, but if it's around money, I think it's really important to understand the difference between a loan and a debt, and if those things are bringing you anxiety because you feel pressure, or you're not someone who likes to have a loan, or, you're feeling overwhelmed by it. So I think that's a good place to start exploring how can we experience more peace and abundance around money. And, so I'm glad that you clarified.
What is your objective with your student loan? We're here to help you get the most efficient method of reaching that objective, understanding how these programs work, what it takes to get them resolved as far as not having to pay them off because of a loan forgiveness type of program, what it looks like from a modification standpoint, or whether you should defer interest for a time period, or if that's going to be dangerous. So, big topic, and what I've brought in today is Tim, I think I'm going to hurt myself, Carden. All right, now Tim is someone that I've known for quite some time, and we started talking about this financial world over 20 years ago. From a very small coal mining town of Carbon County in Price, Utah, as far as where we met, he's actually from Cincinnati. He's someone that really understands this at a deep level. I was in Austin, Texas. I was getting up giving a presentation to a large group of employees of a company that we work with and talking to them about student loans. And I just said, there's not a whole lot you could do. And then Tim just raised his finger and said, well, there's actually a lot you can do. Got up and gave a bunch of suggestions. So I brought in the right expert for this today. Tim, glad to have you here on the podcast. So Let's just talk about the student loan issue as far as what can people do, what are the different types of programs that are out there, and hopefully enlighten people a little bit.
Yeah, there's basically about 10 different repayment options that exist. Some of them are going to be income-based and some are going to be asset-based repayment options. And what you really have to do is get clear on what is my overall strategy as far as which one's going to fit for me best in each individual. So if you're trying to start a new practice or a new business right out of the gate in college, the student loans can crush you right out of the gate. Never allow the business to even grow, because if you have $200,000 to $300,000 in student loans to get a medical degree or a law degree or something like that, just the interest payment alone would crush you from being able to capitalize that business.
Yeah. How crazy is this, by the way? It's so easy to get a student loan compared to about any other loan out there. But you have all these people getting a student loan, then they want to start a business when they get out of school, and they can't get a business loan because of that student loan. The only asset behind the student loan is whatever education you have, and how practical is that education in what you're actually going to implement. That might be another question. So just a little, rant I had to go on there for a second.
No, and it's exactly what's happening to many, many Americans is they're graduating with a tremendous amount of student loan debt, and it's crushing them from ever getting started. They don't get their peace of mind fund built. They don't have any safety or security. They're not able to capitalize a business. And so if that's the scenario, then we need to control cash flow as much as possible. So you're going to go into one of the 6 options for income-based repayment. That will allow you, most of the time they're going to say, okay, what's 150% of the poverty level? Any money you make above that is considered discretionary income according to the student loan department.
What's the poverty level?
It's based on a per person rate, right? So like a single person, the poverty level is if you make around $12,000 to $15,000 a year, depending on your zip code, because they do give some consideration. I mean, if you're in New York and making $15,000, apparently you're above the poverty level.
It'd be tough when you have fees for the tunnel.
Exactly. So the poverty level is quite low. They say 150% of that, any money you make above that is considered discretionary income. And then your payment, depending on the income-based repayment plan, will be either 10 to 15% of that extra income. That will be where they cap it, or they can cap it at a 10-year repayment, principal and interest repayment amount.
All right, so just to recap this, make sure I'm understanding it. We take the poverty level, and then we say above 150% of that, you have to start paying 10 to 15% of that additional income they're calling discretionary income towards the student loan as far as income repayment plan.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's usually your best option for controlling your cash flow. But let's break that down into real life. If you're making, let's say you start a new practice or new business out of college, your first year you clear a profit of $50,000. If your poverty level with 150%, let's put that at $20,000, they're going to say that you can pay about $3,000 towards your student loans that year, right? Because that
total or per month?
Total,
yeah.
Right? So $250 a month. Well, if you're sitting on $250,000 student loans, which is not uncommon for us to see, especially with many medical fields, you're not even scratching the surface of the interest payment, right? And
so it's a negative amortized loan. It's actually growing in balance at that point?
It will grow, but here's the trick. You make sure you recertify your income every year, and the interest you're not paying doesn't capitalize. So it's not going to grow how much the interest is based upon. It'll keep it in 2 separate columns. So if you had $250,000 of principal and you didn't pay $5,000 in interest, the next year you're not charged on $255,000 for your interest. You're still only charged on the $250,000.
So it becomes interest-free additional principal you'll owe?
Yes.
So they're not charging you interest on, let's say, $5,000 if that's what it grew because you didn't make enough payment.
Exactly.
But you still owe that $5,000.
Exactly. And as long as you cap it or recertify your income every single year, then that interest doesn't.
Well, at least they keep it simple. I mean, God,
that's the whole.
Like we're just starting here,
that's
right?
That's the whole model is simplicity, right? And so.
Sarcasm for those that can't sense it.
Yeah, and so if you forget to recertify one year, though, that interest capitalizes and now becomes part of the original principal for your interest payment.
So you have to recertify, which there's different kind of like middlemen that you talk to in this, because there's the government that's doing the student loan, then they're using private contractors essentially that are these, loan intermediaries, and based upon who that intermediary is, you have different rules. And they're really being trained to get you off the phone as quick as possible and not necessarily do what's right for you. So that's why it's important to understand this so you can do what's right for yourself and not just take advice from some private company that's essentially, paid for how many people they could churn through more so than doing the exact thing that's going to benefit you the most.
And we see some scary advice there too. When you actually do your recertification, you answer at the very bottom, you sign and say, this is a correct reporting or a correct statement of any income I earn. But we'll see some of these intermediaries say, all you have to do is claim your W-2 income. So just do a little W-2, a bunch of distribution, and don't claim that on the form to keep your payment low, and their whole goal is to get you to forgiveness at a highest forgiveness number possible, which sounds great on paper, but think about it this way. If every person that had a student loan, every single person that had a student loan got that loan forgiven, where would the whole system be? It would be a complete and total collapse, which is probably heading that direction.
Right, because
anyways.
we have a bigger, it's like the biggest loan that's out there right now is the compiled student loans, more so than mortgages right now, and car loans, which isn't absurd to me. It's hard for me to actually fathom that that's the case. But let's just think about a couple things here for a minute. You have the student loan. You're frustrated about it because it feels like a weight. It feels like something you want to eliminate. But you're also looking at what's your existing cash flow. And we have this kind of what our basic situation is, that if we don't earn a certain amount of money, it's really hard to live. You know, especially if you're mindful of certain things like how you eat, that could be more expensive. Where you live, that could be more expensive. And if you're trying to just balance life, if you're having to do everything on your own just in the name of saving money, that can actually invite in a level of exhaustion that you become less productive, you become less happy, and the whole thing starts to crumble. So I think it's important that you take care of yourself first and foremost. And as you continue to listen to this, and as we continue to bring on people and have this happen, we're going to talk about ways that you can make more money, ways that you can keep more of the money that you make. But we want to begin and really address the student loan issue, because it is something that I see people thinking from the wrong perspective of how can I reduce my income in order to get a better deal on my student loan. But the reality is that's just going to exacerbate the problem long term, that the real game is that no one shrinks their way to wealth. It's a game of production. It's a game of value creation. It's a game of earning more. Even if you have to pay more, it just means you're going to pay this off quicker. So one of the things that Tim's talking about so far is the income repayment, where we're looking at 150% of poverty level, right? Poverty level depends on where you live, but it might be like $12,000. So above that in income, they're taking 10 to 15%, where you're now applying that towards the student loan. That may or may not even cover the interest. And you're saying that you want to make sure you get a hold of them every single year to, what did you call it?
Recertify your income.
Recertify your income.
Yep.
Okay.
And what that allows you to do is you have, right out of school, you have the smallest payment possible going out, so you can use your extra cash flow to grow your business, expand your means, and be more abundant, like Garrett mentioned. And every single time you do that, when you recertify your income, you're going to recertify a higher income year after year after year. And eventually you're going to turn the flow. It's going to turn into you are making significant progress towards paying off that loan. The goal is that we grow to such a large degree in our business that we pay off that loan and it's no big deal to do so, but it didn't crush us right out of the gate.
Right.
So that's the typical plan for most entrepreneurs, is pick the income-based repayment plan that's going to allow you to control the cash flow the best, use that cash flow for growth and abundance, and you're going to end up far better off. When we see people doing what you mentioned too, where they're trying to minimize their income, then where do they end up in 20 years? Maybe their student loan got $100,000 or $150,000 of forgiveness, but they missed out on millions of dollars of growth along the way.
Well, and let's look at just a couple ideas around this. Like, what are these programs, or if they work for a nonprofit, that it potentially can get forgiven? As I did a basic research, and when I tell you my research, I watched a comedy show, and they talked about this, but they talked about some of these kind of loan administrators, kind of the middleman, they don't allow for that forgiveness. So you have to actually have one of the right loan moderators. I don't even know what the hell we call those people, right? Those middlemen. Otherwise, you might not even be getting the benefit that you thought. It could get denied.
Yeah, you really have to be careful when you're doing, you're picking your different plans, or if you're refinancing those loans. Some of the loans you got qualify for forgiveness. Some of the loans you may have taken out didn't qualify for forgiveness, but you thought they did. And so you need to get clear on which loans you have that qualify for forgiveness, which ones don't. And if you make any changes, make sure that that doesn't either reset your clock or take that clock away completely, because that happens to people as well. With the nonprofit situation too, there are some people that are saying, go out and start a nonprofit, right? And then that way, if you work 30 hours a week for that nonprofit, your student loan forgiveness happens in 10 years. If you're not already doing a lot of charitable work, and so you're having to increase a 30-hour extra justification a week in a nonprofit, let's do the math. If you go out...
Minimum wage? I mean, what are you really getting on this?
If you had like $250,000 forgiven in 10 years because you did a nonprofit and you worked 30 hours a week for 10 years, you're about $17 an hour for that effort.
Right, $17 an hour, plus it's not 100% guaranteed that they're going to allow for report. We've seen reports on this, so you got to be really careful. So look, we've got to do another segment just on student loans, but let's just give you some of the bottom line advice here. One, be careful of getting so encompassed in this and engulfed in your student loan that you stop living your life. You want to invest first and always in yourself. Increase your skill set, your ability, and your ways that you could deliver value in the world. Number two, make sure you still build up your liquidity. You want to save at least 6 months into savings to cover basic life expenses in case there's financial surprises, health challenges, you name it. You want to have that staying power. I call that the peace of mind fund. Then, you want to make sure that you're earning as much as possible and reinvesting back into a business if you started a business or into your career. What is it going to take for you to earn more money? And as you make more money, don't let how much you have to pay towards your student loan prohibit you from actually expanding your means and growing and doing the right things. Now, set money on the side. When you have enough money to pay off the student loan, pay it off in one fell swoop. We'll talk about something in the next podcast talking about cost of money and how this applies to whether you should pay off a loan or not pay off a loan. We're going to talk about how you're always having an interest cost, whether you pay cash or whether you finance. What do I mean by that? And once you discover what this benchmark is for you of your cost of money, you'll know the fastest, most efficient, and safest way to pay off loans.
Want to master your money? Want to figure out the things that you could do to improve your finances? Click here and check out more videos like this on Money Matters.